Well, good afternoon, everybody. I had said last night, if you had watched the Libertarian Party time capsule, that I was going to try to do some lunchtime streams as I'm doing my get ready with me type Liberty Boudoir type stuff. Why not? If I'm already going to be spending the time sitting here fucking around with stuff, I might as well talk to you guys. And I have a backlog of clips and things to talk about because I had been sick last week and didn't do any uploads. So, on a limited time, got my comment screen up. So, if any of you guys want to chat about anything we are talking about, and I'll let you know also what's coming up. But let's get right to the clips as usual, because I've been on a Dave Smith binge. I have some Dave Smith and Michael Malice clips, and then just a little bit of Libertarian Party news. Okay, up to the first clip. If I can get that to go.
And I gotta say, and I know this is an issue that is hotly contested amongst libertarians and has been for a long time. And I know that there are libertarians who have accused me of being unlibertarian in the area of immigration, which I do not think is accurate. I don't support open borders under current circumstances. That is, I don't think inconsistent with libertarianism. I think it's just not insane, to be honest. And I think that, you know, as we've talked about this, you know, to death, but I think that in the same sense, my favorite example ever, and I always forget his name, but he's such a great guy. But he made a video on this, and he made the point that he was like, you know, if you had, I think his example was like, if you were like a country like England, who's been completely disarmed, and there's no guns. Guns haven't been allowed for decades, and the population doesn't have guns. And there were, you know, angry militias that hated England all around, like in Ireland and other countries, like all surrounding them, that were ready to attack England. And you went, we're going to disband the military. And you're like, that's the libertarian thing to do, right? Private defense rather than government defense. And they were like, we're going to disband the military, but we're going to continue to have a ban on guns. Now, I don't think it makes you a bad libertarian to say, no. First, we have to allow people to own guns. And then we could talk about disbanding the military. But you can't just disband, like, you can't just leave them sitting ducks. So having an order of preference of how things get abolished, I don't think is unlibertarian. And to me, borders would probably be the last thing that you'd want to be abolished if you were abolishing the government completely.
Okay, I was trying to pull up an article here, which I will, found it. Awesome, because I want to refer to this. I forgot this was the clip that was going to come up, so boy, I'm probably not going to get much makeup done, because this is a biggie. And on this, I understand Dave's position. I just thoroughly disagree. I used to hold that position. And there was one article by my friend Tom Knapp called Against Stockholm Libertarianism. Good, see it here on my screen. And that is what changed my mind. And then also hanging out with the Radical Caucus. Because there's a particular position called no particular orderism. As you may have noticed, Dave had said, there's nothing wrong with having a particular preference in the order that you would like to see things happen. Of course not. There's a difference, though, between having a preference and saying, we can't do this until we do that. I might prefer we do this before we do that. But that's much different than saying we can't, which is the position he is at least apparently advocating. He wasn't merely advocating a preference. We all have preferences. He was advocating a can't. I can't support open borders in this current circumstance. And that, to me, I don't play the who's a libertarian, who's not a libertarian game. I completely understand his position. Plenty of libertarians hold it. Do I think it is the most consistent libertarian position? No, I don't. If I did, I would hold it, but that's okay. There are positions I hold that plenty of people would think that they're I'm not consistent on some things. You know, we don't get a purity prize, okay? We've got to follow true to our own consciences. But I'd like to address his issue head on. Now, the example that he gave of disarming everybody in a country and then saying you're going to open the borders when you're surrounded by hostile enemies. Okay. Unless he's obviously not dealing with an anarchy, because you have somebody else saying we're going to do X and we are going to disarm the citizens. Even with open borders in a state system, that doesn't mean at all if there's a known threat, you can't repel it. So, plus, that example isn't anything that would possibly happen. We could all posit these mining the subjunctive of libertarian ridiculousness. We've all heard it. What if a Martian came and said, unless you rape this girl, I'm going to kill everyone on the planet? Okay, that's that's the ultimate trolley problem, right? But it's not going to happen. There is no Martian that is going to come down and posit this to you. It might be a fun drinking game for libertarians, but it is not reality. And the example given by Dave is also not reality. And the situation we're dealing with here isn't a hypothetical situation. We are not a disarmed nation looking to open our borders when we're surrounded by a bunch of people pointing guns at us, like his example. Why couldn't you support open borders in the system we have now? He didn't really get into that. He just said, because I'm not insane, without saying what was insane about it. Is the insanity, I'm going to guess, because this is the argument I hear from most libertarians, is that with a welfare state, you can't just have open borders. You got to get rid of the welfare state first. What's the chances you think of that happening? Basically, you're just guaranteeing that neither will happen. Have you perhaps considered that opening the borders would crash the welfare state, and that the way to get rid of the welfare state is to open the borders? See, this is the issue. You're trying to centrally plan liberty by saying we have to go in this order. And libertarians of all people should know that you can't centrally plan. It just doesn't work. And why then we think we could have this dictated order? Now, would I prefer that the welfare state be eliminated first? Of course, but that's not realistic. To me, the libertarian method of going about dismantling the state should be you take every opportunity to strike at the root if and when the opportunity presents itself. And the nature of reality is ridiculous opportunities are not going to present themselves. It might not be your preferred opportunity, but it will be a doable one if it's presented, and you take it. You know, I'm going to give you a weird Xena analogy. Oh my God, because I was just binge watching Xena, where she was having a crisis of conscience and how she thought she couldn't be a warrior anymore because she froze in the midst of battle and said, when you're a warrior, when the kill is presented to you, you have to take it. That's the attitude we have to have as libertarians. When the opportunity comes to cut off the head of a hydra, you cut off the head of the hydra instead of saying, no, I want to cut off this other head first. That's just not the way it works. And that is what no particular orderism says. You take the opportunity when it's presented. If it is possible to open the borders, well, then open the borders and let them crash the welfare state. Because it's true, they both can't exist. Some people will say, oh, we can't have X kind of marriage because our current marriage laws can't handle it. Good. Good. Maybe that will get rid of the marriage laws entirely. Like, listen, I'm as monogamous as they come, but I am totally a proponent of, listen, if you're going to let 2 people marry, then how come you can't let 10 people marry? And they go, well, that will throw chaos into our marriage system. Good. Get the government out of it. And I see your question, James, and I will address that when I'm done, like a little bit of the stream of consciousness that I'm on. So I would really love to discuss that point with Dave, particularly the issue of no particular orderism. I almost said borderism. Funny. That revolutionized my I'm getting a frog in my throat. Ribbit. Hold on one sec. My libertarian thinking. It really did. That's when I think, became a radical, is when I accepted no particular orderism. And I've had people present other, what I consider outlandish examples to me. I believe it was Sam Goldstein. No, Joshua Katz said to me, well, what if you could eliminate feeding prisoners without releasing them, and then they'd all starve? That is ridiculous. That opportunity is not going to present itself. Plus, you're atomizing something that's a complete system. The complete system is housing prisoners, and that includes showering and feeding and all the other things. You can't just carve out one little thing. That's nonsensical. If any of you have read Zwingli's argument against the non-aggression principle, George Smith did this great rebuttal where he gave this ridiculous example. If you guys haven't read it, this is just going to sound completely outlandish to you, about a witch that goes around stealing a basket of penises. Is there a penis stealing witch running around? No. So I don't think that's something we need to worry about. But I actually would like to read Tom Knapp's. Where did I put my glasses? Oh my God. I wanted to read Tom. I could do it without. Oh, it's on my face. I am so fucking old, it's not even funny. I want to read this article. This article really, it's simple, but Tom Knapp is really good at explaining more complex things simply. And I will definitely link the article or say the link or something, James. But you can find it easily by Googling Napster, which is KNAPPSTR, and the name of the article is Against Stockholm Libertarianism. And it's short, I'm going to read it. And now I'll be quoting Tom. We should repeal all of America's 20,000 odd gun control laws. But of course we can't do that until we've eliminated homicide. We should close down the war on drugs. But of course, we can't do that until we've scourged away every last vestige of the human desire for intoxication. We should eliminate Social Security. But of course, we can't do that until all its current and future payees lie a moldering in the grave, having never missed a monthly check. If I put any of these propositions up for debate, my fellow libertarians would make short work out of me. They'd have my head on a platter. It would be easy because all 3 of these propositions are ridiculous on their faces. And then he quotes somebody else who says, under the present welfare system, a vote for open borders is a vote for higher taxes for all. Someday, the libertarian message of peace, liberty, and prosperity will reach the entire world. All people will then enjoy the freedom and high standard of living we take for granted. In that day, immigration and open borders will be non-issues. And he goes, sound familiar? That's George Phillies, candidate for the Libertarian Party's 2008 presidential nomination. And then he quotes someone else. We must secure our borders before we can deal with the issue of how to deal with illegal immigrants already in our country. And Tom Knapp goes on, Heard that before? That's Wayne Allen Root, another candidate for the Libertarian Party's 2008 presidential nomination. Now I'm going to tread on some sacred cows here. I'm warning you, get into your safe space, because he's going to quote somebody else. Physically secure our borders and coastlines. We must do whatever it takes to control entry into our country before we undertake complicated immigration reform proposals. Taxpayers should not pay for illegal immigrants who use hospitals, clinics, schools, roads, and social services. And here's Tom again. Ring a bell? Hey, that's Ron Paul, Republican presidential nomination candidate. I'm including him because despite his recent born-again hard claims to represent conservatism, I don't know anything about those claims, just as an aside, most libertarians regard him as one of our own. It's not just presidential candidates, of course. And then he goes on to quote very similar other quotes. I don't need to read all those. They pretty much say all of the same things. But here's the part where he really gets to the point. So Tom continues, ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a hostage situation. It's a neat scam, this holding of one positive reform hostage, while around the corner your political enemies hold its counterpart hostage as well. You won't let your hostage go until they let their hostage go, and they won't let their hostage go until you let yours go, and they'd really rather you didn't. No muss, no fuss. You've both successfully avoided responsibility. They've avoided doing something they don't want to do anyway, and you've avoided doing something you claim that you want to do but are looking for an excuse not to advocate. It is the pleading prayer of St. Augustine. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this Latin, which, let me, da mihi castitatem et contentium, whatever, sed noli modo, whatever, cleverly disguised as practical political necessity. There are probably as many extant definitions of libertarianism as there are libertarians, even zero aggression principle libertarians, and they often disagree on what course principle dictates in various circumstances. Amongst the strangest, though, of all these definitions is, I stand for freedom, just as soon as these other guys do, and not a moment before nonsense. As popular as know-nothing bullshit, festooned with, I'd love to advocate immigration freedom, but first you have to convince that guy over there to give up his food stamps, hostage-taking camouflage seems to have become what passes for a libertarian movement these days. I'm surprised we're not all running into each other at Stockholm Syndrome survivor conventions. And amen. I mean, that says it all. It really does. You're just ensuring it'll never happen because you've got to sometimes force the hand. And the fact is, opening the borders will have to do something to the welfare state. And here is the thing. It's the state that is aggressing against us by forcing us to pay for certain things. It's not the immigrants that are aggressing against us. So punishing the immigrants for something the state is doing is not justice. Remember who the real aggressors are. So you're inhibiting what libertarians claim to believe a freedom of movement right, as long as the property owners, and our borders aren't private property, that would solve everything, consent, or then why would you restrict that because another person might do something else? That is not a valid reason to restrict the freedom of one person. That's like saying, that's why we have drug laws. You can't put drugs in your body because I might have to pay more at the hospital or more in taxes. We don't use these arguments for anything but immigration. And we wonder why people think being against open borders sounds a little xenophobic. And I'm not claiming anyone who holds it is xenophobic. Please don't misunderstand me. But I'm trying to make you understand why it could appear that way when that same logic isn't used for nearly everything else. Why should we have freedom to put whatever we want in our bodies when the medical system is so subsidized? You know, why should we be able to do X when it might put more strain on the public roads? I mean, you could make this argument for everything. But you don't get to restrict the freedom of another person because the state might do something in response. You could only restrict their freedom if they directly are going to aggress against you. So again, I just thoroughly disagree, but probably more people agree with Dave than agree with me. But I hope to win minds and change hearts and all of that. And I'm slowly working on my husband, who's coming more and more to my side of things. His issue isn't so much the welfare state. His issue is, I think, more security issues. You know, we live in a world of fear. Of course, me as an anarchist, I don't really like. A lot of minarchists will say, well, we have to know who's coming in our country. See, I don't even believe in government IDs, but that's going down a whole other rabbit trail. So now let me get to some of the questions that had come up. So let me put this on the screen. James had asked, can you address citizenship and open borders? Often not discussed. That could go two ways. And please understand that I come at this, you know, I'm not a minarchist, I'm an anarchist. So to me, like, citizenship is, it's not a concept like I even agree with. It's that property ownership is the concept I would use. But I would say anyone who wants to become a citizen should be allowed to become a citizen. I really don't see that as an issue. As I'm trying to put myself in a minarchist mindset, as to what might be a citizenship requirement, perhaps a certain minimum time of being here to establish your good faith intentions to become a citizen. And that would be, I would think, pretty much about it. And why not? You know, things will balance themselves out. Once it becomes no more trouble than it's worth to come over here, people aren't going to keep coming. And I think we underestimate how difficult it is to leave your birth country and your homeland. Listen, I complain about the United States a lot, but if I sit down in my heart of hearts think of ever leaving, I don't think I could. You have a tie to where you were born, particularly moving somewhere where your language isn't the first spoken language. I learned this when I was doing a lot of evangelism work with the church. And that was one reason why I wanted to learn Spanish, because I was in South Florida and there's a lot of Hispanic people and they understand English just fine. But if you're trying to talk to people about spiritual things, you need to talk to them in the language of their heart. And the language of their heart is their birth tongue. And you miss that. I think sometimes we forget the very organic connection we have with our homeland. It's not the easiest thing to just pick up and traipse off to some other foreign country. I think we make very light of this, like this is just going to happen, you know? And immigrants have been a net positive to this country. So if we're also going to go down that route, why are we making a distinction between people who happen to pop out of their mother's vagina on this side of a particular border rather than this side only for countries? Hell, there are some states that have more generous welfare programs. Perhaps people shouldn't be able to cross state lines. Perhaps they shouldn't be able to immigrate. Colorado's full. You can't come here. You might raise my taxes if you come here. No more. I want to close Colorado's borders. We would think that's ridiculous. So it's food for thought, I hope. And let's see if we've got more comments. So putting pressure on this, James says, putting pressure on the system brings up the question of identitarian blowback. I don't find identitarianism rational. So I'm not going to factor irrational people into my calculations of freedom. Jesus once said that the poor will be with us always. Unfortunately, I think not only the poor will be with us always, but so will bigots. And I can't worry about that when it comes to the freedom of other people. Okay, right here. What if they seek to plan a socialist communist democracy movement? How do we gain a foothold under the current system? Well, we have plenty of people born in America that are doing that. Do we deport them? I mean, do people only have freedom of movement if they have the right thoughts? That gets really, really dangerous. And the fact is, as long as we allow political authority, there's always that danger. That danger isn't an immigration problem. It's a political authority problem, because we don't need immigrants to come and do that. We have plenty of Americans doing that. And if we're not saying you can't live here, we're going to deport you with those ideas, then what matter does it make that the person who holds those ideas, again, happened to come out of a vagina at a different longitude and latitude than the American who thinks it? And James said, thank you for my Jesus comment. I'm a Christian. I long since stopped apologizing for drawing upon my background. I don't mean ever to get preachy to people. I don't do that sort of thing. But as I said, where you have to speak to people in the language of their heart, when you're talking, you kind of got to use the language of your heart as well. I mean, people who are going to get offended at that, nah. I don't worry about that anymore, so thank you. All right, I forgot that was going to be such a weighty topic. I probably
take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to